Hello, this is an assessment of a Gors Kallmann upright piano made in about 1896, 123 centimetres tall. The client would like us to assess it to see whether it's worth restoring, and if so, what sort of work needs doing on the piano. So first of all, Gors Kallmann, one of their favourite veneers seems to be worn up. There's a large number of Gors Kallmann worn up pianos in the UK. So it's the top of the piano here. I'm looking at that because that's the worst damage really. So here there's a bit of veneer missing, and here clearly it's had water damage. It's really advisable not to put any water on top of a piano, and it can seep down here as well and then get onto the dampers, so that can do a lot of damage, so really important. And the veneer is very, very tasteful. It's a nice figured worn up, as you can see here. You tend to get these darker patches as well with walnut, and huge contrast of colour really. We're very like walnuts a lot. We're actually French polishing a walnut piano of a similar age at the moment, and so it's a wood that we particularly like doing. It's different from rosewood, is much more common for pianos generally, Bechstein for instance, but Gors Kallmann certainly they do a lot of worn up pianos, so it's a veneer they get really right. And in the front here you can see the beautiful inlay. So obviously if we repolished it, that would be more contrasting. It's faded in and a lot. Of course it'll be darker. There's slightly dark on the inside there, but it will go slightly darker still really. We're obviously trying to keep the piano light. By the way, it has an extra music stand here. That's common on top quality German pianos. So you've got the music stand here. This music stand's quite a different colour for some reason. It's obviously been kept inside, and that you can see that's not faded with the rest of the piano. So you might have said that was the colour of the whole piano originally, and it's the whole lot's faded. Though inside lid doesn't normally fade, so not quite sure. Perhaps it was repolished at some stage. There's a lot of history behind pianos. It's often hard, even when we assess so many, we can't always tell what's been done. The key tops, there's the name of Gors Kallmann Berlin. That's pretty standard. That's their usual logo, and that's supplied by Aldersons and Brentel of Newcastle. Let's say there are a reasonable number of Gors Kallmann pianos in the UK, but this one is a bit different from most, as I'll try and explain in a minute. So 85 keys, that's pretty typical of older pianos of this sort of age. Though some makes like Blüthner go up to 88 early on, and taller Bechsteins too, but here we have 85 keys, which is quite normal. You can certainly learn to play and study on an 85 key piano. You can see the difference here. These are all pretty perfect, these ivories. There's little cracks there. We can't really do much about that, because if we try and take it off and try and find one that matches, we have got plenty of spares, but it's better to keep this. It's a better match really. So there's some line here as if it's been taken off and stuck back on, but actually they're absolutely level, so it might just be that dirt's got into the line. Not quite sure there, but we'll certainly try and improve the keys as much as we can. There's 63 centimetres legroom from the floor. That's pretty standard, slightly better than usual, but the pedals are 9 centimetres tall, and that modern pianos are usually 7 centimetres. They can go down to 4 or 5, which is ideal. These are too high really, but I think if we can probably angle them a bit more, put some felt here, then that'll bring them down a little bit, perhaps to 8 or so. And that's quite angled there. That's obviously worn, because if you see that one is flat, so you can see that's worn down, but the angle's useful actually. The foot fits better on it. That pedal's not used very much, so this is the half blow pedal, not really used on uprights very much. And this one, I'd like to bring it down slightly, perhaps put some felt there, and that'll bring it down. We can't bring it down too much, because otherwise there won't be enough play, but there's enough distance there to get it's very creaky at the moment. There's enough distance there to get pull the dampers off, and so that's something we would like to do. The back of a lot of older upright pianos has either some material, or this is gauze, I think. Now this is some sort of kind of like sackcloth type material, and it's very ripped, as you can see. So that's something we'd normally just take it off, because you don't need that nowadays with vacuum cleaners. You don't need really something to stop the dust getting in, and modern pianos never have anything like that. If we look at the felt behind the keys, we can see some gaps there, and that's usually an indicator that it has some moth damage in the piano. So we'll just have a look at that. It's obviously very important. It's so common these days. Now, I've turned that rail upside down. You can see definitely it's been eaten by moth quite extensively. So we'd expect to find some of that under the keys as well. Now, as we look under the keys, we can see the felt's been replaced. So that's this replacement felt, and the centre here we can see that there is some moth damage. You can see that they've eaten some of that, but they've not been eaten all the way through. So very often you find that they're still okay. The front ones are obviously changed, and if they're completely eaten through, then you can see the keys are not going to be even, because that's what you even out the keys with. You put little felts underneath there, and the keys then stay at the right level. So you can see these keys are at the right level, so obviously that's not been a problem. And if we take the action out, we can get a clear picture of the back rail, and we can see the felt there. That's also been replaced. And by the way, if we see this rail here at the back, that's often used as a stop rail for the keys, rather than having felt at the front. We prefer to put felt at the front. On some older pianos you will find that, so you could actually not have, you often find them without any felt on the front, but then they feel a bit bendy, so I prefer putting felt on the front if there's room to do so, and then there always is really. You can see these chasers are slightly damaged. I'm not sure what damage that is. That moth wouldn't do that normally. Maybe mice at some stage, they would possibly do that. You can see some felts have been replaced. There's different colour on the right and the left hand side here. And while we've got the action out, we can check the soundboard and bridges, and they're extremely good condition. Let's have a look at the bridge here. Sometimes you get bridge cracks at the end here, so that's something to check, and you can hear that as a slight buzz normally if that's happening, but I wouldn't expect the bridges to be defective on this. Now, other work that's been done on the piano, if you can see new return tapes, and they look quite new actually, so not too long ago I'd have thought those were done, and they probably graphited here as well, so when you do that you normally want to get access. You can see possibly some new felts behind there. Perhaps the moth had eaten some of those. That's quite common for moths to eat these felts that are behind there, so you get a clicking noise. You can see the red felt there, and that's quite often eaten by moths, so that might well have been the case. So looking at the rest of the piano, there is some work to do. There's some slack here. You take up the slack with these rocker system. Unfortunately, it's not like a modern capstan, but it's perfectly doable. Just a bit more time it takes, really. And there we are. So you can see quite a lot of slack where the key's moving before the hammer. And some of these hammers are also very tight, so we would normally replace the centre pin on those if there's lots of them to do. If there's just one, we might lubricate with Protec. There are some very tight hammers. This one here is not coming back hardly, so we can, as I say, we can change the centre pin on those, or we can, if we want a quick job, we can lubricate it with Protec. So I pulled the action forward now, and you can actually, they've replaced all of the return springs here. Well, that's useful, because obviously some of those were broken, so they decided to replace them all, which is a job that we don't have to do then, and we'll check it's been done how we'd like it to be, because they should all be the same tightness. Obviously they want the springs to be exactly the same as each other. So let's have a look at this one here. So there's one there, that's the one that's coming back very slowly. So if I use Protec, I can lubricate that, and it'll then come back, suddenly it'll come back faster. By the way, these need to be tight. You can tighten these screws here, that sometimes makes them tight, otherwise the centre pin needs changing to make it tighter. So let's lubricate that one and see what happens. So I've got Protec in this very old-fashioned container. I'm not sure where I got that from. Must have been an old toolkit from a piano tuner. So just going to put some Protec on here and a little bit on here, and now let's watch it come back quickly. So there, it's one of the fastest ones now. Now, as I say, we'd like to change the centre pins. If we've got lots of them, then just one or two, well, you might use Protec. There's nothing wrong with that in a way. In the long term, changing the centre pins better, but a lot more work. So this is obviously very quick. I mentioned earlier that this is an unusual Gors Kallmann, because most Gors Kallmanns are overdampers. We do have a video of an overdamper Gors Kallmann. If you look at our video channel, you can find that. If you put Gors Kallmann or overdamper, you'll probably find that video. So most of them are overdampers, and you can work on those. They're still beautiful tone. The tone of those are as good as the tone of this, but the issue is that it's not an underdamper, so it doesn't dampen well. So especially this area, it won't dampen like that. It'll hold on for a lot more, as you'll see from the other video. So that makes this a good candidate for restoration, in the sense that the damping is like a modern piano. So all modern pianos are underdampers, at least as far as I know. Now the damping it needs adjusting here. It's really coming off far too early. As I press the key, then the damping's coming off straight away. So if you press the key, well, there's a little bit of slack there that needs taking out, but the damping's lifting off almost straight away, which means it's not working very well. If you listen to some of them, and some of them are a little bit skew, like this one here. So there's definitely a lot of work to do. Now we can replace all the dampers. In fact, we can fully restore this piano, and it will turn out really beautifully. But I'm doing the video on the basis that expecting it not to be fully restored. If we fully restore, we'll change everything. Obviously hammers, dampers, the whole lot. The hammers have been refaced by whoever restored the piano. You can see the dirt there, so clearly a refaced one. There's less hammer than there was originally, but a reasonable amount of hammer still. Hammers usually take one refacing, and then they still sound, let's say, 80% as good as they could. And that's a beautiful tone. Badly regulated though, if you see there, lots of slack, and it's checking very late as well. And the dampers are coming off too early, so just a full regulation needed there. It's got a reasonable tone, and I think if that was redone, we would find an excellent piano. It is actually a whole semitone flat, so if we listen to this C here, here's a similar age walnut Bechstein. So a whole semitone, slightly more than the semitone flat is the Gors Kallmann. It has an equally sweet tone. You could change the strings on the piano. If we pitch raise the piano, there's no strings broken side, not expecting any to break in pitch raising, especially if we lubricate here before we take them down, take them back up, lubricate here. With a good oil-based lubricant, you have to make sure it doesn't come onto the hammers. The dampers. You can use Protect, Protect's very expensive, and you lubricate along here too, and take them down before taking them up. Then it's very, very rare that you break a string doing that. But we could restring the whole piano. Restringing this one isn't as easy as restringing the Bechstein. I'll show you why. So it has agraffs here. It doesn't have agraffs here, whereas the Bechstein has agraffs all the way up. So there's the Bechstein. You can see agraffs all the way up the whole piano, right through to the top. That's not unique for Bechstein, but it does show it's a very high quality piano. You do often have a pressure bar at the top end. In fact, most pianos do. A Bechstein go right to the top with agraffs. Not essential to have agraffs. This is a Steinway, which we're working on for a client, and this has a pressure bar, much thicker, very thick pressure bar, right the way through to the top, and that's very stable too. A little bit more difficult to restring because you on the agraffs, it's very clear. You go through the 3 clear holes, and the strings are then spaced much better, really. So with agraffs you have perfect string spacing. It's important to make sure they're bedded down properly, and also you just have to check that they are all level with each other, so when the hammer's hit, it's hitting all 3 strings at once. At the moment, not only are the dampers too early with the strings, but they're also not coming off hardly with the pedal. If you look, in fact, some of them aren't coming off. That's the right hand sustain pedal, and it's hardly working. So obviously we can put that right. That's not going to be an issue. So here's the assessment sheet. I haven't written everything down here. There's quite a lot of work to do on the piano. I just put full regulation, especially damping timing, but there's a lot of things to do, fixing the pedals and so on. The key weighting is not too bad. Once it's lubricated, the balance rail, that'll bring that down a bit, and then we might need to just even out the key weighting. But 52 is fine for middle C, 63 a little bit high for the bass, and it looks as though, generally speaking, it's not terribly bad, so that once it's lubricated, that should be fine. And it's an overstrung underdamper. So we have got a video showing those terms. If you look at our video channel and put overstrung or underdamper or something like that, you'll find that video. So the pedals are a bit high. I definitely find that uncomfortable, but there is a reasonable leg room. So I'm going to hopefully that's helpful. I'm going to play the piano and think let's compare it with the other two pianos that we've got in, just to get some idea of tone. So of course the tone on this will be greatly improved when it's pitch raised as well, but it sounds sweet. It's Gors and Kallmann's definitely sweet sounding pianos, and I'm confident that that can be improved enormously. Here's the Bechstein where we finished working on this one. So it's a slightly taller piano and excellent. This is a Model 3 Bechstein. And we'll listen to the Steinway though. We're working on some of the bass dampers, so those strings are going to echo with the strings we play in the middle. So it gives you some idea of comparison. It's a tall Steinway. So we haven't finished working on this one, but it's going to be a very pleasing instrument indeed. Just going back to the Gors and Kallmann. It's a sweet sounding piano, and in the trade, I think you'll agree if you're a piano tuner, that they are very pleasant pianos indeed. So that's a Gors and Kallmann upright piano, unusually overstrung underdamper. Worn-up ones, and all the ones we've seen practically, have been overdampers, and obviously being an overdamper you can't get the good damping that you get on most upright. So there, for instance, it rings on. So we have got a page, we have the video of overdampers if you were interested in finding out more. And lots of pianos in the UK are overdampers, a high percentage. I'm not sure what it would be, but certainly over 10%, probably over 20% are overdampers. Less than they used to be. When I started off in the trade in Portsmouth, every other piano was an overdamper. If you have any idea how many you think there are, if you're a piano tuner, it'd be useful to have a comment underneath. So underdamper, Gors and Kallmann, so that's quite a significant thing, and the casework's always so beautiful on Gors and Kallmann, so it could be repolished, definitely. We could recondition the piano, we can fully restore the piano, obviously that's much more costly. We can hear the potential even though it's a semitone flat. And the dampers aren't working properly either. So definitely a candidate worth working on. Thank you very much for listening. If you've got a piano that you'd like restored and you'd like us to assess it, then we can bring it to Oxford and do this assessment video for you. It has to be a piano, unfortunately we have lots of pianos to restore, so it has to be one that we are really confident we're getting an excellent result from. Thank you very much for listening.